All right. What's up, everyone? We've got the tunnel of doom thing happening here. Let me shrink that out of the way. Welcome to class, I guess. Hopefully everyone got the email in time. Hopefully no one showed up in room 100 and was like, where is everybody? I'm not sure how bad the weather is up in Boulder. I live down south in Golden. Weather's a little rough here. Not the worst thing in the world, but worse than I wanted to deal with on my commute to Boulder. I haven't canceled this class at any point in the semester, and I figured doing it once probably isn't the end of the world. So hopefully you can all bear with me. The other thing is what I wanted to talk about today is something that's code based. I planned on just having my code editor up in class, typing away, chatting about things as we went. And honestly, that's something that I could do on screen, uploaded to YouTube, and shared with all of you just as well. The other benefit to that is when it's on YouTube, you have the ability to pause it. And as much as you may want to, you don't, unfortunately, have the ability to pause me in person. You can ask me questions, but, the lecture goes on and on. So hopefully this is useful, and everyone will be able to follow along and get something out of it. The other thing to note as we get started, before you kind of like glaze over or anything, is in terms of this video, it is required. And there's a sort of quote-unquote attendance question related to today's video. And the attendance question is going to be to do what I'm doing, to make the same thing that I am making, uploading it to your server space, and then on Edmodo, I will have week 12's attendance question posted there. You'll jump in, you'll essentially post your link to the thing that you've made today as your attendance, and that's how I'll check things. If you don't do it, it'll count as an absence from the lecture, etc., etc., so make sure you do it. Because, though, this is more of a step-by-step hands-on thing, I will extend the due date of this week's attendance question till probably Thursday afternoon, we'll say, Thursday of this week. One thing to note, though, with that is if you have if you have lab on Thursday of this week, you are going to want to watch this video before lab, because the lab in-class activity this week and early next week is based on what we are going to do in this video. And if you haven't watched this video, and if you haven't done what this video requires of you, you're going to be essentially unable to complete the lab activity for later this week / early next week. So do that. You'll be good to go. And if you're wondering what the heck we're doing, we're going to build essentially a JavaScript-driven clock. So I've got a wonderfully aesthetically pleasing example right here. But regardless of styling on it, since I'm really just focused on the JavaScript with this one right now, regardless of that, we can see that it does work. 12:51 and 48.9 seconds PM. If we let it tick for another 7 or 8 seconds, it'll roll over to 12:52, so we can see that this is indeed working. Wait for it. Yay! Tuesday, April 4th, 2017. So, yeah, none of that is manually written within the HTML document. This is all being driven via JavaScript and time and date models that are built into the JavaScript language. So we're going to explore that. I'll sort of build the file. We'll talk and dissect each piece one by one, and that should give you what you need as we move into lab later this week. And again, what you need to do for attendance this week is this. You need to do this clock, basically. So just keep that in mind. Before we get started with that, 2 little pieces of news or info that I want to share. If you haven't checked the email, well, it'd be impossible to do because you wouldn't know how to find this video. If you didn't really read much of the video or email, I did post midterm grades, and I'll be working on posting attendance grades over the next week or so. Midterms are more important, obviously, because you can get a range of scores on that. Most folks did really well. The average score for the class was an 87% overall. A decent number of A's, a lot of B's, a decent number of C's, and only a couple of D's, and only, I believe, 1 F. So most folks did really, really well. Again, an average score of an 87 is technically above average. So That's good. That's great. The highest score in the class was a 99, or it was technically like a 98.6 or 7%. So again, rock stars all around. Great work on it. Sorry it took me so long to get that back. If you have any questions on the midterm, feel free to shoot me an email. David Shaw or Carrie Santos can also help you out if you want to look at your test or anything like that. They'll have access to show it to you. So yeah, just keep that in mind. The other thing I want to share is not really directly related to the lesson today, but just kind of a cool little nugget that emerged over the weekend. Over the weekend, it was obviously April Fool's Day on Saturday, and some of you may know this, but Reddit launched kind of an April Fool's joke, although it didn't really seem like a April Foolsy thing. They released a subreddit called Place, or r/place, and they had a 1024 by 1024 pixel blank canvas, and any Reddit user could come on, click on one of the pixels in that canvas, and change the color of it, change the color of that one pixel. And their account was set up on a timer, and you could only change one pixel every 5 minutes. So the idea was that someone couldn't go in there, draw a whole bunch of stuff, and ruin everything. You had to take your time, and it almost had to be collaborative. It started off kind of chaotic, people just putting pixels everywhere, and then subreddits started getting involved and creating really cool stuff and coordinating the content that they were adding to r/place. So I have that up right here, and it's since closed. It closed yesterday, I think, at like 10 a.m. or so. But if you just go to reddit.com/r/place, you'll find it. And in some ways, it's actually really, really cool that they've sort of frozen it, because now it is what it was, sort of locked in time, as opposed to something that'll change every day, every week. And it's this massive, basically, pixel art project, and there's all sorts of just amazing, cool stuff, pop culture references, nerdy stuff in here. There's like a Broncos logo right there, which is awesome. A lot of universities are in this space. CU is here somewhere. Let me find that again. So we're by Mona Lisa. Yeah, so we got Mona Lisa right here. Colorado flag. Buff logos right there. CSU. The DU logo. And these were all things that were collaborated upon by Reddit users. And it was a small collective of CU student Reddit users who collaborated on this CU Buff logo. Yeah. So it's fun to look at. It's really interesting. It took a lot of coordination, and the idea was basically you can change small things by yourself, but to do something big, you need to work with others. It was sort of the mantra or the spirit of the project. And as you can see, I mean, no one person could have done any one of these things, being able to do just one pixel, one little square every 5 minutes. So it was groups of people who figured this out. The country hearts were done by, small groups of folks within those nations. Any picture, any image you see, the Linux folks, always fun. It's like a big Star Wars quote right here, which I got a chuckle out of. That took some coordination. So just kind of a really cool kind of internet artifact that emerged over the weekend. And I have a feeling this is going to be one of those things that people talk about for years to come, and I'm sure will be in the internet history textbooks in years to come also. So kind of a mashup of all things Reddit, since this was all Reddit users who put it together. And they came together with their various interests, whether it be video games or other stuff. It just turned out really cool. Someone also posted a time-lapse of r/place as it was happening. It's a 57-second long animation that just shows how it started happening with music. And the Germans are taking over down at the bottom. And blue. Cool, right? So anyway, just wanted to share that with all of you, just in case you weren't aware of it. Just kind of cool, interesting stuff that that took place over the weekend. So jumping into the JavaScript clock, let's go ahead and start actually crafting this, shall we? This will be sort of a standard process. So fire up your code editor, jump into your folders and everything like that. I will post the working version of my code after the attendance question is no longer available for turn-in, because I want you to do this. And so if you just took my code and turned it in, that would sort of defeat the purpose. So I'll post my code, but it'll be like probably Friday morning that I do so. Maybe Thursday afternoon, we'll see. But yeah, just keep that in mind, because I want you to do this yourself. So like any project, you will want to start off with probably like a blank HTML document, and then go ahead and copy paste it to create, you know, a new version of it. I've got my finished version called clock demo, so I'm just going to call this clock.html, like so. We'll fire that up in Sublime Text. That way we can play with it. All right. And we're also going to need to create a JavaScript file within our JS folder. That's no surprise. So file, new file, and then immediately go ahead and save it. And just make sure that it's being saved into the right folder. And I was going to call this clock.js. Nothing crazy. Like with any new project we're working on, it's always worthwhile to test to make sure that your JavaScript file actually is being loaded in. If it's not, the rest of the code we're doing is kind of pointless. So I'm just going to start off, as I've done a million times if you've had lab with me, and a couple of times if we've done things in lecture. I'm just going to do an alert. I'm going to say, did the code load? Save the JS file, and jump back over into my HTML file, and head on down to sort of the bottom of the body, and actually load in this JavaScript. All right. Script source, js/clock.js, type equals xs/JavaScript. Looks good. The alert is there. Let's do a quick save on both of these just to make sure it actually worked. And from there, go to our clock.html file. There's my alert, so it worked. Sweet. We are in business. And if not, rewind a little bit, check my code, make sure your stuff works. Let me bump up the size of this just a smidge also, so it's a little bit easier to see. This will be in 1080, so if you go full screen on this thing, it should be pretty easy to see my code too, hopefully. So we need to build a clock, right? So let's first start off within our HTML document and build all of the pieces of it. Like I said before, I didn't write the time into the HTML document. Or at least the time that changes. But I do need something in there to start with that I can go off of. So the first thing I'm going to do is just create a section. And this section will be the section that serves as my clock. I'm going to give it an ID name too, just in case I need to control it later. I'm just going to call it clock. And if we had a time, you know, it would be something like 12, 30... and if we have seconds in there also, and like 40 or 24 seconds, maybe PM. You know, that's sort of what a time would look like if we were to set that up. If I were to do a date in here as well, it would be something like Monday, June 18th. I know it's not June 18th. And then 2008, let's say. Go back in time. So yeah, I mean, we get that, you know, makes total sense. Actually, I'm not going to deal with commas right now. I know it's more grammatically correct, but we're not going to deal with that right now. So that's a time and that's a date, right? Save, refresh. And it show up. You know, kind of a mess, but it shows up. I'm also going to get rid of that alert real fast since we know everything's working. So what I want to do is break this down into its individual components. I'm going to do this line by line, just so that things look just a little bit more manageable as we go forward. So the hours, the minutes, the seconds, the meridian, as it's called, and the just the little colons in between the various time markers. So that's cool. I'm going to do the same thing with months and days and all that stuff. Sort of just enter it all down on different lines so that we have these sort of distinguished pieces like so. And then what I'm going to do is take both of those components, put them into their own paragraph elements. So there'll be a paragraph for the time and a separate paragraph for the date. I'll just indent so it's a little bit easier to read. And all of these components are going to need to have IDs so that JavaScript knows how to target each one of these different components, with the exception of the colons. I'm not going to do anything with those, but everything else needs it. So I could do paragraphs, but paragraphs are block elements. It's going to put all of them down on different lines, which I don't want. I wanted to say, like 12, 30, and 24 seconds. So I'll do it backwards. 12, 30, and 24 seconds PM, all on one line. So I'm not going to use paragraphs here. I need to use some sort of inline element. And the inline element I'm going to use is just a span element, like so. And the span element is obviously an HTML element designed to go around spans of content. But it's inline, and it's also sort of inert. It doesn't do anything. It just creates an HTML element around our text that we can leverage moving forward. So putting a span element around each one of those 4 pieces, all contained within my first paragraph. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing down here for the date. Obviously, I'm kind of going quick with copy pasting, but just make sure that it's open span, close span, and you'll be good to go. Once we've done that, again, the whole purpose of this is to be able to target this and change it via JavaScript. So each one of these span elements is going to need its own ID name. That way it could be tweaked and tinkered with. So I'm just going to jump into each one of these. But I'm going to give them names that hopefully make sense. I'm going to call the hour one, I'm going to give the ID hour. I'm going to take the minute one and give it the ID minute. Second, or seconds, we'll have the ID second. The meridian, as it is called, we'll have the ID name meridian. We'll jump down here to these, and we'll do weekday, month, date, year. So ID weekday, weekday, month, date, year, like so. And that's great. That basically enables us to now target these and change them via something like, an inner HTML function within our JavaScript. So pretty good all day. And that should be pretty much everything that we need to do within the HTML document. We might come back to it from time to time, but again, most of this is going to happen via JavaScript. So as long as it's set up like so, with this content within your body and a link to your external JavaScript file down at the bottom that's working, you'll be good to go. And just to really hammer home the fact that we're going to be changing these dates and times ourselves, I am going to change all of these to like very generic, very obviously not when we are right now dates and times. So it's going to be Monday, January 1st, maybe 2000. So yeah, clearly not today. I have no idea if it was actually a Monday on January 1st, but yeah, whatever. Cool. So that's the setup of our HTML document, clock.html, JavaScript's loading. So the rest of this, again, will take place within our JavaScript file. So we're going to switch back over to clock.js. And the first thing that I need to do is start creating variables that I could use to reference all of those ID elements in my HTML file. So if you have to go back and forth to remember what you call those things, that's great. But I'm just going to start off by creating variables that I could use. That way, instead of constantly typing in document.getElementById, I could just say, oh, the hours or the minutes or the seconds within JavaScript. It'll just be quicker that way. And just to keep the names slightly different from one another, I just called it hour, minute, second, meridian, etc. In the HTML document. I'm going to start them all off with clock here. So it's going to be clock hour, just so we know we're not getting too terribly confused. And I know the whole purpose is to not constantly type in document.getElementById, but we need to do it this very first time as we're declaring our variables, and we should hopefully know that by now. So document.getElementById, and it was just hour, right? So there's an ID called hour, so it's getting that. So anytime I talk about clock hour, I am effectively, within my HTML document, talking about this piece right here, the hours, right? We'll go down the line. We'll basically do that for all of the other chunks. I'm going to do clock minute, document.getElementById minute to access the minutes. Clock second, document.getElementById second. And we're going to do clock meridian, document.getElementById meridian. Make sure it's all spelled correctly. All right. Cool beans. And then we'll need to do the same thing for the next chunk. Days, months, the date, the number, date of the month, and the years. So I'll start plugging all those in. I'm going to say clock day, document.getElementById weekday. Make sure I didn't have any caps in there. We'll call it clock month, clock date, clock year, Oops. Clock year, All right. Clock day, clock month, clock date, clock year, weekday, month, date, year, weekday, month, date, year. Okay. Just want to make sure everything is solid as I go and I'm not goofing anything up. Cool. So that should define most of what we need for right now. And actually, I'll create one more for the clock, just in case I need to change the overall clock as a whole. So it's called clock right here. So yeah, we'll just do one more of those. We'll call it JS clock, document.getElementById clock. That way we can change it if we need to. The next thing I'm going to need to do is create some sort of function that changes the time over time, no pun intended, right? I want this to dynamically be changing. Every time a second ticks by, I want to see it. I don't want to wait for on click or something like that to run the function, which is typically how we've been doing things so far this semester. We've clicked a button, or we've like moused over something, or we've typed something in, and then the function runs. Here, I want this function just constantly running over time. So to start with, we need to create a function like we've done many times throughout the semester. Function, we'll call it change time, since that's basically what the function is doing. So once we create this change time function, within here we need to figure out what we want it to do. I want to just make sure it works to begin with. So as always, it's a simple little alert just to make sure it runs. And again, in the past, when we've worked on functions, we've set them up with a button. So on click, it would run the change time function. But I'm not going to do that here. What we're going to do, after you complete this little function right here, leave the function. Basically go outside of its ending curly bracket. And we're going to call the function directly in the JavaScript file. And it was called change time. So if we simply say change time within our JavaScript, that should call the function right there. So we've created a change time function with an alert. And then immediately after the function is created, it runs, right? So if we were to save and check that out, it should hopefully work. There we go. Did the function work? Yes, it did. Cool. Awesome. Okay. So that gets us part of the way there. We want the function to run automatically without clicking on anything, but we want it to run constantly. You know, we want this always to be checking the time and updating our clock, not just running once like it's doing now. So that's actually a pretty easy thing to set up with JavaScript, and it gives us a lot of cool flexibility with what we do. I'm going to create a set interval method. Set interval, you know, if you think about an interval of time, right, it's a duration of time. How often is this going to run? So set interval, and then I'm going to say change time, because that's the name of my function, comma, 1000. So what this is basically saying, line 18 of my code, is it's setting an interval where my change time function is going to run every 1000 milliseconds, is what that means. And, you know, math on that's pretty easy. 1000 milliseconds is 1 second. So the change time function is going to run once per second. If you want it to run faster for some reason, you would just decrease the number of milliseconds. You can have it run at 500, which would run every half second or so. JavaScript, I've noticed if you make the interval too low, like 1 or 2 or 10 even, it's not actually happening 1,000 times per second. It is much slower than that. Anything above about 500 milliseconds and you're pretty good, though, in terms of actually logging what's happening. So set interval, change time function, and then once a second. So basically what will happen right now is my page will load, my function will activate off the bat, it'll pop up with the alert, and then 1 second later that alert will come back. Even if I X out of it, and then a second later it'll come back again and again and again. So right now I basically have just a super, super annoying website. Never actually, you know, do this for a project, but we're testing it right now, and alerts are fine when we're testing. They're just not good on real projects. So we'll save, we'll just make sure that the interval is working. We'll jump back over, we'll fire up our project. Function works, I hit OK, and I wait, comes back. I wait, it comes back, wait, it comes back. Yeah, worst thing ever, right? Would you like some viruses? Now, there's no viruses on this, but it feels like I'm on a page that's trying to give me one. So, but it's working. We can see that the 1 second interval, and I have to keep clicking. If I stop, it just like loads up these things. But we can see it works. So the change interval or the set interval works. Now I can get rid of that alert because I know the function works, and I know that the interval that it's supposed to be happening at is working again at the speed that I wanted to. So what I actually want to have happen is the hours, minutes, seconds, meridian, the weekday, month, date, and year are all changing based on the clock. And this isn't necessarily based on some server clock out there like Apple server clock or like you know, the atomic clock or anything like that. It's running off of your computer. So there is a margin of error in this. You know, if you have your personal computer set at an odd time, your JavaScript clock is going to display that. For today, actually, that's a good thing, though, because to really get a sense of this working, we're going to need to mess with the time a little bit. So that'll be okay. So within this function, basically, I'm going to be spending the remainder of my time on this file within this function. I need to start collecting the date information. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new variable within the function. I'm just going to call that variable today, right? Yeah, because the whole point is this is our calendar date. So I've got my today variable, and the today variable is going to equal a a new date, if you will. And this is specific JavaScript syntax. What this does is it creates a variable that contains date information, or time and calendar day information. And then from there, I can build upon it. So I built my today variable just to start. And now I need to start building my hour, minute, and second variables that I can then plug away at. And we'll start with those, and then we'll work to the calendar dates in a second. So we'll create a new variable. We'll call it hour. An hour is going to equal today, again, our date object dot get hours. And the get hours method is going to actually look at the clock on your computer and pull the hours that it currently says. So variable hour equals today.hours. And we could test that real quick. We should probably test all of these variables just to make sure that they're working. Again, I know it's tedious, but if we have an error somewhere, we don't want to code, dozens of lines and not realize that it was never working to begin with. So I have a variable called hour, which should be pulling the hours from my machine. So if I say alert hour, it should pop up with an alert that says the hours of the day. So again, save, refresh, 13, cool, right? And since it's on a set interval every second, it's going to constantly pop up saying 13. And it says 13 because JavaScript computes hours based on a 24-hour clock, not zero or midnight to noon and then noon to midnight. So we will have to adjust that. It's not a huge deal, but it's something we'll have to deal with. So hours work. Excellent. Awesome. So we've got that first variable in there, variable hour, and then we're going to get hours. Now we'll create another variable for minutes. And as you would expect, it's going to be more or less the same thing, except it's going to be variable minutes today.getMinutes. We'll alert that just to make sure it's working. Actually, I'm not going to say minutes. I'm just going to call the variable minute. So it'll be minute today.getMinutes, and then alert minute. 20. Awesome. It's 1:20 on my clock. So it's working. Another variable, we'll call it second, and it'll again be today.getSeconds. Open parenthesis, close parenthesis, semicolon. And then we'll run an alert to check the second variable. All right. So actually, my clock on my computer doesn't show the seconds, and I think my profile image, my screenshot thing, is covering it right now, so forgive me there. Yeah, let's find out. So we'll save, and we will refresh. 36, okay. 39, 40, 41, 42. Yeah, it's working. Cool. So hours, minutes, and seconds all work as we need. Let's go ahead and add another variable for the meridian real quick. Well, no, we can skip that for now, actually. Hours, minutes, and seconds work, and that's good. So let's go ahead and save this file real quick and make it so that the hours, minutes, and seconds actually load into the clock and not just popping up in alerts, because that's, again, super annoying. I'm going to clear a little bit of room because there's actually more that I want to add kind of in this area right here. So I'm going to enter down a couple of lines towards the bottom of my function and start to input hours, minutes, and seconds into my my clock. So you'll remember at the very top of our code, I created a variable called clock hour, clock minute, and clock second, which are based on ID names of the elements within my HTML file that I'm trying to change. So instead of saying document.getElementById, hours, minutes, seconds, I could just say clock hour, clock minute, clock second, and JavaScript will know what I'm talking about. So I'm going to say clock hour. Well, if caps lock wasn't on, let me try that again. Clock hour dot inner HTML, because I am trying to change the interior content of that element. So clock hour dot inner HTML equals hour. semicolon. And so by saying that, my clock should update automatically to what the hour of the day is. I figured out what the hour of the day is by doing a get hours method, and then I'm plugging that hour of the day into this element on my HTML page. So we'll save. It's, again, 1 o'clock. The time that I manually typed in said 12. So if this worked, it should now say 13 o'clock, basically. And there we have it, 1300 a.m., basically, which is a time that doesn't exist, but we'll fix those things. Don't worry about it. So yeah, we're good to go there. And if you want to get a little bit ahead, you've probably figured out the next chunk of this is going to be more or less the same. What I want to do next is target my variable clock minute and say .inner HTML equals whatever my minute variable happens to equal. And then after that, I'm going to do clock second .inner HTML equals whatever my second variable happens to equal. So we'll save there. So clock minute inner HTML, clock second inner HTML, and clock hour inner HTML. Save and refresh. And now I have, pretty quickly, a dynamic clock that's in fact changing. 13, 24, and 56, 7, 8, 9, and now 25. Sweet. But we've got some problems happening here. Notice real fast how the seconds, we're used to seeing it like 06, 07, 08, 09, and it didn't do that. Those are going to be things that we have to add ourselves to the JavaScript. When we pull a time, it's not formatting it in a way that we're necessarily used to seeing it. It's just giving us that number. If it's been 5 seconds into a new minute, it's just going to show the number 5, not 05, like we would expect on a clock. So we'll tweak these things. We'll make this clock work and function the way we want to, and get it going. Now that we got that working out, let's go back into the top part of our function right here, and set up the dates and everything like that. Kind of get them working at a basic level, and then plug them into the second line of our HTML file. So I'm going to do that right above the variables that I created before, and again, all of this is happening within my function. And what I will want to do, like always, is just say var day, because it's going to be like Monday, June 1st, or like Monday, January 1st, 2000, So I'm going to want to do, the day of the week, the date, all that stuff. So we'll start off saying var day equals today, because again, we're basing this off of that today object, get day. And we'll talk about how it gets the day in a second, whether it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then from there, we're going to say var month equals today dot, get month. And that'll get the month, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth, with some quirks, but we'll talk about those. Then we'll say var for a variable. We'll say date, and that'll be today dot get date. And date refers to the numeric date of the month, so the 5th, the 20th, the 12th, whatever that is. That's what date means in this case. So just keep that in mind. And then the last one we'll do is year. And year will be today dot, as you would probably guess, get year. And now we'll have all of those variables defined for us. What I want to do next, I obviously want to make sure these all work. So I'm going to do an alert for each one of them just to make sure that they all pop up the way they're supposed to. So bear with me for a moment. Try them out yourself. Again, don't just assume that they're going to work. Try them. So I'm going to do alert day. I'm going to do alert month. alert date, and alert year. So I'll get 4 alerts that pop up, but it should be the day, whether it's like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the month, January, February, March, the date, the 1st, 5th, 20th, whatever, and then the year. So if I save, again, those are alerts, so they'll just kind of bombard me when I go to the page. 2, okay. That first one was for get day. So, okay, Tuesday must be the 2nd day of the week. Then I get a 3. That's the month. Well, that's weird because we're in April. If we think about this, and if you think about working with arrays from weeks past, this is probably starting to put off a light bulb in your head. Tuesday is not the 2nd day of the week, and obviously April is not the 3rd month of the semester, or 3rd month of the year. When JavaScript counts weekdays, and when JavaScript counts months, it starts counting at 0. So Sunday is technically considered the beginning of the week. So Sunday is 0. Monday is 1, Tuesday is 2, Wednesday is 3, and so forth. And when JavaScript counts months, January is month 0. February is month 1, March is month 2, April is month 3, and so forth. So it's a little confusing, but we'll fix it in a couple of minutes. Just know that 3 is, in fact, April when doing a getMonth method within JavaScript. 2 more to go, the date and the year. So if I click OK, the 4th, it is actually April 4th. And don't ask me why, but it doesn't do dates starting at 0. It does dates by whatever the day of the week is. The 1st is the 1st, the 2nd is the 2nd, the 4th is the 4th, all the way up to like the 31st being 31. 111. Interesting how it abbreviates that, but that's how it gets the date. So I almost feel like I did that kind of wrong, but no. Variable year, today.getYear, alert year. And we get what we get. So the 17's right, so we're probably on the right track with things. So we'll click OK for it. And then it's running that function every second, which is like the worst. So we'll close out of it. We have those variables set up. I can get rid of the alerts now. And we can move on to that. Now that I'm actually thinking about it, it was a little quirky that the year thing was as it was. If we change it to get full year, let's try that instead and see what we get. So alert, year, save, refresh, 2017. Okay, so that's my bad. I goofed up on that. So the one thing to change here for your year is it's not get year, it's get full year. So just keep that in mind. Then you should be good. Now that we have these variables set up for day, month, date, and year, we can start to plug them into our HTML document, similarly to how we did with hours, minutes, and seconds down below. So I'm going to kind of write this the same way that I wrote or declared the variables up above. So hour, minute, second, and then right below that will be day, month, date, year, sort of right down here. Just like before, I have created variables to define elements within my HTML page, clock day, month, date, year. Now I just need to reference them again down below. So down here, it'll be clock day dot inner HTML equals day. That's the variable from right up above. And then it's going to be clock month dot inner HTML. Let me scoot that up a little bit. Clock month dot inner HTML equals month. And then we'll go, what was the next one? The next one was clock date and clock year. So clock date dot inner HTML equals date and clock year dot inner HTML equals year. All right, so we save all of those. Save. And if we refresh our page again, probably the most annoying looking calendar ever, 2/3/4/2017. There isn't a person out there who would understand what that means, especially again because the day of the week and the month start counting at 0. It makes us think that we're on like Monday, March 4th, and that would be if you were really, really perceptive. So it's working. I'm getting those values plugged into my HTML document, and ultimately that's the piece of communication that we need to have happen. We now technically, I mean, in terms of a very bare bones, not really user-friendly calendar / clock, it's all working. I'm pulling the hours, I'm pulling the minutes and seconds, I am pulling the day of the week, month, the date, and the year. It's all there. And you can see this work if you were to go into your time on your computer and manually change it to a different time. All of that info would change as the function runs itself. So give that a try. Set your clock to some different times, some different dates, some different months, and see if your clock automatically changes to that. We know it's happening because it doesn't say 12 a.m. on January 1st, 2000 anymore. So it actually is giving us that date, and we're in good shape. The big problem that I'm facing now is the day of the week and the month. It's just not great to look at. So I need to change that up a little bit. And we've done this stuff before. We've worked with arrays before, and we know that arrays are variables that can contain multiple pieces of data. So instead of just saying 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for the day of the week, I want to say Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, right? So I'm going to create a new variable here, and I'm going to call it, we'll call it days of the week. That'll be the name of our variable. It'll be an array, so we set it up with straight brackets, and the content that we want in this array is written in between our opened and closed straight brackets. So make a little bit of room in there for that. Tab over within the array so that you actually know where this content is, and it looks kind of nice. And remember that the days of the week start counting at Sunday. So you have the ability here to make a really, really confusing calendar. You don't have to put these in order. But, Sunday is day 0. And since the first entry in your array is entry 0, you should have those two be the same thing. If you put Friday first, people are going to get really, really confused looking at your calendar. So don't do it. Sunday within quotes, because I want the word Sunday to show up. Sunday within quotes, comma, make sure the comma is outside of your quotes, and then we'll work on the next day, which is obviously Monday. We'll leave the commas, or we'll leave the quotes and put in a new comma, and then just kind of plug in the rest of the days of the week. So again, I almost goofed up because I was talking and typing, and I'm bad at that. Don't put your commas inside the quotes. Make sure that the comma is outside the quotes to tell the array that these are different entries within it. So, yeah, let's keep going. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Cool. It's all there. The last entry in your array does not get a comma after it. If you did, it would assume that there's another entry afterwards, and there's not. At least in terms of days of the week, there's nothing after Saturday. It then rolls into the next week, and we have Sunday. So as long as that array is set up, we are good. And we'll be able to pull from it and do some specific things. So let's start to create a bit of a hybrid here. Let's go down to our clock day, where it's currently spitting in the number 2 because we're on Tuesday, right? I don't want it to say 2, the number 2. I want it to say Tuesday. I guess ironic that they kind of sound the same. So instead of just saying the day, the raw numeric variable for it, I'm going to say days of the week, right? So if I say days of the week, it's referring to my days of the week variable, my days of the week array, I should say. And we know to access a specific value from an array, we simply do a pair of straight brackets immediately after the array name. And within there, I could say 0. If I wanted Sunday to show up, I could type in 0, and it would say Sunday. In fact, if I save that right now and refresh the page, it says Sunday. If I go back in, type in a 1, save and refresh, it says Monday. If I go in, type in a 5, save and refresh, it says Friday. So it's working. But I don't want to manually type in a number. I want it to be dynamic. I want it to change based on the actual day of the week it is. I've already calculated that. I know the day of the week by my getDate method, or my getDay method, and it's stored within my day variable. So if I simply say days of the week day, it's going to take whatever day it was, plug it in, and call that specific entry from my days of the week array. It's day 2, again, starting at 0. So 0, 1, 2, it would pull up Tuesday. And tomorrow, it would be day 3. So 0, 1, 2, 3. Tomorrow, if we were to check this again, it would say Wednesday. So we'll save our project real quick, refresh our page, and sure enough, I've got Tuesday. Not bad. Now we need to do basically the exact same thing for the month. I don't want it to say Tuesday 3/4/2017. I want it to say Tuesday April 4th, 2017. So I need to create another array and do basically the same exact thing with months. So it'll be a little bit bigger, but exact same thing. I'm going to do this right after my days of the week array. Create a new variable, and I'm going to say months of the year. I'm going to clean up my capital letters. Months of the year. I am camel casing it, capital O, capital T, capital Y, just like I did with days of the week. And then what we'll do is our set of straight brackets. Jump in here, and then just start plugging in the months of the year. Starting at January again, same reasoning. We want to do it in order. Not Monday. What am I doing? January, comma space. February. Sort of plugging away here. It'll take a minute. Not too bad, though. And just be cautious with your quotes and your commas. Make sure you don't end anything accidentally or put them in the wrong places. You should be nice, distinguished. The commas should all be outside of your quotes, and you'll be good to go. July. So that line got a little long, just because I threw it all on the same one. Let me just make sure I didn't miss anything. January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. Cool. And again, no comma after December. And now I have my months of the year array that I can call from in the exact same way that I call the days of the week. And again, since months start counting at 0 also, this works perfectly for my array. So I'll save that real quick. Jump down to the clock month, which was currently just pulling the month value, which is off. It's 3, even though it's April. And I'm going to say months of the year, because that's my array name. Pair of straight brackets. And instead of saying 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or whatever, I am going to say month, because month is actually pulling which month it is. That's my variable from just up above on line 22. So it's basically the exact same principle that I did for the day of the week. I'm now just doing it for the month of the year. So we'll save that, refresh our page, and now it's Tuesday, April 4th, 2017. Not bad. So we got that going, and things are in pretty decent shape right now. The only last thing I need to do is kind of fiddle with this clock a little bit, because there's some quirks to it, if you will. I mentioned it earlier. Well, actually, we can see it right now. It's 5, 6, 7 seconds, and it tends to be a little bit more preferable when we're at those first 9 digits. If it's like 01, 02, 03, just so we always have 2 digits within our clock. So I'll need to manually add that. Same with minutes. If the minutes are less than 10, I want it to be like a 01, 02, 03 instead of just 1, 2, 3. So I need to add both of those. It'll be pretty easy to do. And then I'll start needing to work on this AM PM thing, because we're definitely in PM right now, and that's not showing up. So we'll work on all of those things bit by bit, get this clock kind of fully functional, and then go from there. Another real quick thing that I'm going to do, this is an optional step. I'm just going to bump up the size of that clock a little bit, just because it's a smidge small. And I'm going to do it just with a little bit of inline CSS. You can obviously do it with external CSS, and it would be more proper. I'm just going to throw this in here just so this is viewable on screen. And I'm just going to say body. This is back to my HTML document if you're curious. Font size 3EM. All right. Style type equals text/CSS. All right. So now it's much nicer to look at, which is good. Okay. So back in your JavaScript file, we get the minutes, we get the hours, we get all of that stuff up here. And then down here is where it actually gets displayed. So if I want to change this to make it display in a nicer way, I need to do it. I need to change the information before I actually display it. So if I plan on changing the minutes around at all, adding a 0 before a 1 or a 2 or a 3, I need to do it before it actually shows up on the page. So I need to do it before this chunk of code down at the bottom. So basically it needs to happen right in this neck of the woods. And I don't always want there to be a 0 at the beginning of my minutes. If it's 34 minutes into an hour, I don't want it to be 034 as the minute. Or if it's 45 minutes into an hour, I don't want it to be 045. I want it to be 45 or 34, whatever the minute is. I only want the 0 at the beginning when it's 1 minute, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So what I need to do here, and we've talked about these before as well, is I need to create an if-else conditional statement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say if my minute variable is less than 10, so if it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, if the minute is less than 10, then what I want to have happen is my minute variable actually equals, within quotes, the character 0 plus the minute value. So if it's 2 minutes into a new hour, I don't want it just to say 2. I want it to say 0, 2. And so that is what I am doing here. I'm saying that minutes are now going to be equal to the character 0 plus whatever the minutes happen to equal. And it'll only do this if the minute value is less than 10. If it's greater than 10, it'll just ignore this whole chunk of code right there. So a little touch up like that will help us out. I'm going to save real quick, and I will have to manually readjust the time on my clock because it's 1:48. I don't want to wait 12 minutes just to test this out. So jump in real fast, adjust date and time, change, and so we'll make the time, make it 3 minutes into the thing. So we'll change that. We'll save. We'll refresh. And now I get 1303 as my time, which is what I wanted. Now with that in mind, I could do basically the exact same thing for my seconds. I'm going to do this outside of my if condition right here. I'll create a new if condition directly beneath it. And I'm going to say if second is less than 10, change the second variable to equal the 0 character plus whatever the second value happened to be equal. So if it was 3 seconds, it would be 03, 04, 05. It's just another quick little touch up to help fix the the page real fast. And if we refresh, I have 05, 06. I got lucky and it was already at the first little chunk. And that's working. So again, we are good to go there. The next thing I want to do is set up my time so it's working more like I want it to work. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to go up to the very top of my code, and I'm going to create a new variable. Because maybe I want to be able to toggle my clock between 12-hour mode and 24-hour mode. So I'm going to create a variable called 12-hour, and 12-hour is going to equal true. So we're on a 12-hour clock right now. Simply saying 12-hour equals true does nothing, but setting up that variable is the beginning of this process. So what I'll do next is head down to those ifs that I was working on a second ago. And the first thing I want to do is I want to create a new if in here, and I want to say if 12-hour equals true. Make sure you have a double equal sign in there. It's essential when you're checking equality within an if condition. A single equal sign assigns value. A double equal sign checks equivalency within an if. So if 12-hour equals true, which it currently does, I want it to do something specific. And actually what I'm going to do within this if condition is I'm actually going to create another if condition to change the AM PM. So within this 12-hour true statement, I'm going to say if hours are, or if hour is greater than 11, meridium, which just want to make sure, or clock meridium, as I called it, sorry. Clock meridium dot inner HTML equals the word, the string PM. So why am I saying if hours are greater than 11 instead of greater than 12, right? Well, think about how hours work. Hours are counting up 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. So if it's 11 a.m., if it's 11 a.m., we're in the a.m. time period. What's the next hour value that's greater than 11? 12. So as soon as it hops from 11 to 12, as soon as it becomes greater than 11, then the clock meridian inner HTML code will change to say PM. I'm going to add an else in here as well. The else is anything other than the if being true. So the if is if the hours are greater than 11. So the else is if the hours are less than or equal to 11. So within the else condition written right afterwards, I'm going to say clock meridian dot inner HTML equals AM. And that will account for my toggling between AM and PM time within my clock. So nice and easy, just a small little if-else condition just to check the time and change a piece of it based on if it's over 11 hours or under 12 hours, basically. So that's great. Let's see. So this entire if condition, if-else condition, takes place if 12-hour equals true. All of this takes place only if 12-hour is true. But what if I want a military clock? What if I want a 24-hour clock? If I have a 24-hour clock, I don't need AM or PM at all. I basically want the meridian value to go away. So if 12-hour is true, I want it to show AM and PM. If 12-hour is false, basically I want AM and PM to disappear altogether. So I'm going to add an else condition onto my main if condition that I've set up here. And so this is where indenting becomes super helpful. That way we can actually see where things are and when things are happening. Yes, I have an if-else condition nested inside of an if-else condition, but because I've tabbed over, I can see it plain and clearly. So if we're on a 12-hour clock, if 12-hour is true, then it'll change AM and PM accordingly. If I'm not on a 12-hour clock, what I want to have happen is clock meridian dot style dot display equals none. And we know about this from working with our media queries and hiding things and showing things. If I'm not on a 12-hour clock, I don't want to see AM or PM at all. It'll just go away. So if I save that and refresh my page, we can see we are now in PM. It is checking that. My hours are greater than 11. It's 13. So it's PM time now. If I were to say, you know what, we're not on a 12-hour clock, I'm going to change it to false, refresh, it just goes away. So when it's false, the meridian value goes away. When it's true, it pops back up. Now you may be asking, well, hey, we're supposed to be on a 12-hour clock, 12-hour equals true, but why does it say 13 hours? Because we haven't changed it yet, and now we need to do that. So we will head down here, and I'm going to make sure that I'm out of this last else condition that I've created in here. So I'm going to enter down a little bit further. I'm outside of it, and I'm going to create one more if condition in here. So I'm going to say if 12-hour is true, so again, if we're on a 12-hour clock, what I want to have happen is, let's say I want to have it say if hour is, if the hours are greater than 12, yeah, right? So if the hours are greater than 12, I want it to do something. So I have this set up within my 12-hour if condition again, because I only want this if condition to run if, in fact, I plan on using a 12-hour clock. So if I'm on a 12-hour clock, if it's true, what I wanted to do is I wanted to check to see if the hours are actually greater than 12. If I've gotten to 13 or 14 or 1,500 hours, right? And so if I have gotten to 13, 14, or 1,500 hours, what I want to have happen is I want to say that hours, or hour, actually equals hour minus 12. What the heck does that do? Well, if the hours are currently equal to 13, right, which it is right now, it's 1 o'clock, I want it to say 1. I want it to say 1 o'clock, not 1,300. So how do I make 13 equal 1? You subtract 12 from it. If it was 2 o'clock, 2 o'clock in military time is 1,400 hours. How do I make 14 say 2? You subtract 12 from it. 3 o'clock, 1,500 hours. How do I make 15 equal 3? You subtract 12. I think we see the pattern here. To convert any military time to kind of standard AM, PM time, you just subtract 12 from any of the values greater than 12. That's what we're doing here. So if, and only if, the hours are greater than 12, the hour value will be hours minus 12. And it'll convert that nice and easily into numbers that we would come to expect. So if I were to save and refresh my page, now it says 1:13 and a couple of seconds. PM. That's great. So we have now built a nice JavaScript clock that toggles back and forth between those two values. So let's, well, I mean, it's kind of annoying that we have to go back up here to this true false thing and change that. Maybe we'll go back into our HTML document one more time and add a couple of buttons in here that we can actually use to toggle this. So I'm going to create a button, and we'll call this button 12-hour time. And I'll create another button right next to it. And this button will say 24-hour time. So 12-hour time as one button, 24-hour time as another button. If I save and refresh, boom, there they are, right here, right next to us. Now what I need to do is have each of these buttons run a function that changes my 12-hour time, or my 12-hour variable at the top from true to false, right? So what I'm going to do for each of these buttons is I'm going to say on click, and I need to give these function names. So we'll call it on click. We'll call it switch to 12. Will be the name of that function. Switch to 12. On my other button, it'll be, again, on click. We'll call this function switch to 24. Will be the name of that function. Switch to 12, switch to 24. So now what I'll do is I'll jump back into my JavaScript file and create those functions. Now, before you get hasty, remember where we are. I've been working inside of a function this whole time. And now what I'm trying to do is create a new function. Yes, you can create functions within functions, but we don't want to do that now. I want to create a new standalone function within my JavaScript. So I'm going to make sure that I leave my change time function that I've been working in this whole time. There's my bracket that closes it off. This is what runs the function continuously. So I'm just going to get past all of that and make a new function. You can't always do everything within one function, especially if you want to call functions through different methods like setting an interval or clicking or whatever else. So now that I've left that function, I'm going to create a new one, right? And I'm drawing a blank. I already forgot what I called it. Switch to 12. We'll start with that. Function switch to 12. And what the switch to 12 function is going to do is simply take my 12-hour variable that I defined at the very top of my page and say 12 hours is true, right? It was already technically true, but I need to set that up just so that if I go to 24-hour mode, I can change it back. Then I'm going to create my second function, switch to 24. If I'm on 24-hour time, 12 hours is technically not true, right? So I'm basically just switching between true or false. My switch to 12 function says 12-hour time is true, and my switch to 24 function says 12 hours is false. That's what each of those functions will do for us. It's basically switching between true and false. Well, that's a good thing. When 12-hour is true, I want the AM PM thing to happen. When 12-hour is false, I want it to disappear. When 12-hour is true and I get to 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock, I want the hours to say 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock. If 12-hour was false, I wanted to ignore that code, and I wanted to say 13, 14, 1500 hours. So basically by adding these two little functions right here, just changing 12-hour from true to false based on which one I click, the rest of my JavaScript will work and behave within those constraints. And I'll have it set up so that I can quickly and easily toggle between the two time modes. So I'm on 12-hour mode by default. And if I hit 24-hour time, it switches to 24-hour time, 1300, and the Meridium disappears. Click back on 12 o'clock. Oh no! Meridium didn't go away. Where'd you go, buddy? What did I do there? That was unexpected. 12-hour time. 12-hour equals true. Did I spell it wrong? 12-hour equals true. What did I do wrong there? Huh. Well, let's try. If 12-hour equals true. Oh, that's why. Because I never set once the Meridium gets set to display none, it won't come back. So let's take this and let's say clock Meridium style display, inline block. Hopefully that'll make it pop back up. 24. Yeah, there we go. All right. I just had to add one new line of code to actually, because if it goes to Meridium or 24-hour mode and the Meridium gets set to display none, it's going to stay at display none from then on, even if I switch it back to 12-hour. So if I switch it back to 12-hour, I also need to tell the Meridium value to also show back up. So I'm going to say clock Meridium.style.display inline block right in there. So little quirk, but we got it. So yeah, that is, I mean, basically, I mean, we can see it right here, right? This is a JavaScript clock. We're changing the date, the time, everything else. We're in pretty good shape. So hopefully this made sense. It's kind of a nice exercise in JavaScript because we're manipulating data that we're getting from elsewhere on our computer and controlling it via JavaScript. There's actually a lot more we can do with this, and the lab exercise for this week will be to create kind of a more creative, interesting JavaScript clock. And so I'll have some examples to show and everything like that. So more on that when you get to lab and you actually work on this exercise. But for now, just of course, make sure that you've done your JavaScript clock. Like I said, I'm not going to post my code until after the attendance question is due, because I want you to do this yourself. I don't want you just to copy paste my code. So do this, rewind, watch it again, do whatever you have to, and get to a point where you're feeling good with it. Obviously, once you're done, you'll have, just like I do right here, you'll have, clock.html and clock.js. Upload those to your server space. And on Edmodo, I will have week 12's attendance question. To answer week 12's attendance question, all you need to do is post a link to your clock file. And so it'll be, creative.colorado.edu /tilde your username /web/clock.html probably. Make sure you're not giving me a relative link on your computer. Make sure it doesn't say file //volume/users. That won't get me anywhere. Make sure it's creative.colorado.edu /your username /web/clock.html. Post that as the answer to this week's attendance question, and you'll be good to go. And again, I will leave that question, that attendance question online until Thursday of this week at 5 p.m. So you've got a little over 2 days to answer it. So shouldn't take too long. I was talking a whole lot during this video. This is honestly something that if you were just to do it, we're talking about an hour of time. So hopefully everyone's at a place where their clock is basically done. That to me proves that you did it. That to me proves that you attended this video. So thanks so much. For folks who have lab with me, I'll see you either later this week or early next week. As always, if you have questions for me, let me know via the midterm or whatever else, and we'll go from there. So have a good one, and thanks so much. I'll see you all in person next week, unless the snow is worse. Fingers crossed it's not. Peace. See you later. And stop.